In the budget 24-25 presented today, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced that new 109 high-yielding and climate-resilient varieties of 32 field and cultivation crops will be released for farmers in this financial year. An allocation of rupees 1.52 lakh crore was made for the agriculture and allied sectors. The budget laid out 9 priorities for the year ahead, one of them being productivity and resilience in agriculture. Besides, the government, in partnerships with states, will promote digital public infra for agriculture. In the next 2 years, 1 crore farmers will be initiated in natural farming. It was announced. Rupees 2.66 lakh crores will also be provided for rural development. The finance minister, in fact, reiterated this a couple of times. We continue to talk about some of the nuances and takeaways from the budget. Joining us at this point in time is Mr. Satish Ramchandani, co-founder of Updapt ESG Technology. Sunil Garg, tax expert, also with us on the show. Mr. Sandeep Chatra has been with us for the past 1 hour, Executive Director of Action Aid. Mr. Deepak Wadhwa, business guru, also joins us on the show. Vandana Vijay, founder and CEO of Offbeat Tracks, is also with us on the program. Last but not the least, Dr. Sharath Kohli, senior economist, will be joining us momentarily as well. Let me, in fact, also rope in Satish at this point in time. Satish, your impression of the budget 24-25, of course, the government wanted to introduce comprehensive incentives and regulatory changes which were aimed at promoting ESG compliances among the Indian MSMEs. If you look at what was said today, how does that foster that spirit of sustainability through financial support?
I think India, as we know, is among the top 4-5 emitters, given the economic growth and all. But needless to say, I think the measures which the country has taken towards the renewable energy is really commending. For example, India stands 4th globally in renewable energy installed capacity, 4th in wind power. And from a budget 2024 standpoint, I think good policy suggestions have been made for energy transition away from the fossil fuels, including helping companies in cheap credit for green projects, which are pretty important to curb the carbon emissions. I think some of the other policy initiatives, as outlined, where the government will map out a roadmap for moving hard to abate industries from targets around energy efficiencies to emission-based targets. I think the government is really, looking to also overcome intermittency, from a perspective of the pumped hydro storage. I think this policy, again, will be really helpful, given that the wind and the solar energy aren't available around the clock. So I think we are seeing a lot of these initiatives from the government, as outlined in the budget, to diversify our various electricity sources.
Aspirations. Satish, what about the government's ambitions and aspirations to achieve that net zero emission target? What do you think of that?
I think, the government has been pretty wise to, speak about the net zero by 2070 as against some of the countries by 2050, because it's a very practical commitment, given the economic growth of the country, right? We are one of the leading countries with a high economic growth. So I think there's been a pretty balanced approach. And towards that target, we all know, for example, for top 1,000 listed companies, the sustainability reporting has been mandatory since 2023, including a lot of policy initiatives towards hydrogen energy and then also the renewable energy. I think we are among the leading ones, across the globe. As I said, we stand 4th globally in the renewable energy installed capacity and 5th in solar capacity. So I think we are doing pretty good, given, as I said, we are among the top 5 emitters, and then we are a growing economy. And I think the fair balance between, the commitment towards a green ecosystem and balancing out the economic growth.
All right. Well said, Satish. Let me also rope in Dr. Kohli, one of the foremost voices when it comes to the economy and, of course, taxes and the ecosystem. Dr. Kohli, thank you for joining us. I hope you can hear me, sir.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, Dr. Kohli, I'm not going to ask you anything specific. There are a lot of things that came out of the budget. Are there any hits and misses for you that you personally and professionally would like to admire or rebuke on what the finance minister said today? Of course, let's not forget something that we have not discussed, Dr. Kohli, which is the global context. In the global economic context and, this environment of uncertainty and risk, there is definitely, this promise that India's economic might and growth is projecting. It is an exception. And, despite the numbers that we got to see in the Lok Sabha, the finance minister was more positive, more aggressive, more resolute about India's rise in terms of its economic resilience and prowess.
Well, thank you, Vineet. Good evening to my fellow panelists and good evening to the NewsX viewers. Well, I think the global perspective, of course, remains India is growing more than twice the global GDP growth of 3.2%, which the finance minister spoke of in the parliament. We are more than double that, in terms of growth, which is a matter of pride for every Indian for that matter. And this is in a very tough geopolitical scenario where there are two wars going on. There's a lot of stress, tension in South China Sea and some of the other places. In that situation, if we are able to deliver this kind of growth, I think it's remarkable. That's what Finance Minister was referring to, and that's what the economic survey also came. But as far as admirations are concerned, Vineet, for me, fiscal consolidation as an economist at macro level, I think that is a huge takeaway because projecting 4.5% fiscal deficit for the FY26, I think is a very, very promising number, considering that most of the countries are struggling with their fiscal deficits. So that's at a fiscal prudence, fiscal discipline. I think India is going to gain. And if a common man thinks that whatever I got to do with fiscal deficit, that there's a lot of common man has to do, which is why I wanted to decipher it. A higher fiscal deficit means deficit financing, which means more loans on the country, which means higher inflation. So it will go a long way in taming the inflation, and it will go a long way in improving countries' rating as far as the more foreign investments come in. I think the common man benefits from them in more ways than one. Another big takeaway, which is slightly unusual and unprecedented, Vineet, is 1 crore youth being trained in 500 top corporates in India at a stipend of 5,000 rupees per month. I mean, let's not talk about stipend, it's 5,000. So somebody may say, what can 5,000 get you? But the opportunity to be in a top corporate for 1 year as an intern, and this whole project is going to be part of CSR as far as the stipend is concerned. I think that for me is unprecedented. I've been seeing budgets for the last 3.5 decades. Never before have I seen this kind of an announcement where 1 crore people would be trained. I think when this comes to implementation, they're going to learn about the corporate world. They're going to learn about a lot about their careers ahead. Who knows? Many of them may get absorbed by the corporates because of their outstanding performance during internship.
Dr. Kohli,
and they will start liking
sorry
each
to
other.
interject, Dr. Kohli, what about the inflation and unemployment? Do you think that's been addressed here?
I think inflation, you see, the policies which the government lays out, maybe not directly, but, when the budgets used to come earlier, people used to ask what is sasta, what is mehanga, but that is now in the GST purview. That is for the GST Council to the Fitment Committee, which looks after the various rates on what has to go up and down. Directly, it may not impact the budget, but custom duties, like, for example, mobile phones, gold imports will become cheaper. So wherever custom duties has been slashed, you will find those items getting cheaper. But overall, broadly speaking, I think the policies laid down in the budget, they do impact inflation. I mean, everything in economics is interrelated. I can go on connecting them with each other. So everything is interrelated for that matter. Now, there is a saying in English, he who tries to please everybody ends up pleasing nobody. So obviously there were some misses as well, because you were talking about misses. I think the capital markets didn't like the budget because of the long-term capital gains, being raised from 10 to 12.5%, short-term capital gains being raised from 15 to 20%, and the security transaction tax, the STT, being raised on F&O. So the stock markets had a bit of a jerk today, and the general voices among stock market is this was unnecessary and so and so. But it's hard to please everybody in the society. There always have to be some misses, but so long as the misses are 1 or 2 and the rest of them are hits, I think I would call it a good budget. It's a balanced budget. It's a budget which lays down the roadmap for a developed India. And we should not forget, Vineet, that there's going to be another budget in about 6 months' time. So this is just a milestone. There's going to be many chances which the government will get to amend, tweak the policies, augment the policies, lay down new policies. So on 1st February 2025, we're going to have another budget. So I think the budget has made a good beginning for Modi 3.0. And I think a roadmap has been laid. First milestone, get India to the third position by beating Japan and Germany as far as the largest economies in terms of GDP are concerned. Then try and set a roadmap for 2047 of a developed India. Unemployment, yes, in many ways, unemployment has been addressed. I mean, the push to manufacturing and services out of the 9 priorities which the finance minister has laid out, that the prime minister wanted these priorities. I think manufacturing and services push, the MSME push, all this is going to generate, notwithstanding the fact that 11,11,111 crores have been laid down for the capex in the 1st February interim budget. So I think combined together, unemployment is going to be addressed. See, budget is not about that so many people are going to get the job tomorrow. Budget is about policies laid down. Government plays the role of an enabler to where employment can come. The rest of the government jobs are not the job one should be seeking, and because of technology, the jobs are shrinking. But I think unemployment in a country like India can never be kept away from any budget. And the policies which are laid down here are eventually, gradually and slowly, in a steady manner, they are going to expand the opportunities for employment for the youth of this country.
Dr. Kohli, I would also like your comment on what the opposition has also said. Since we speak so often about this entire back and forth that takes place between the government and the opposition, Rahul Gandhi has said that this is a kursi bachao budget. Is he trying to say that this is a populist budget?
Well, I really don't think the budget is populist, apart from the income tax in a limited way, the change made in the new regime slabs, where the slabs have been realigned, to give you 17,500 benefit and the standard deduction. Let's not forget the number of taxpayers. Actual taxpayers are below 2 crores, although 8 crore, 18 lakhs returns were filed in the last year. But the real taxpayers who actually shed out money from their pocket are only less than 2 crores. So how can this be populist? But otherwise, if the government is trying to address the GYAN, the Garib, Yuva, Annadata and Nari, I have added M dimension. I call it not Gyan, it's Gyanam now, because the middle class has also been. So obviously the budget has to be for the people. If you want to look at it from the vision of being a populist budget, so be it. I mean, it is benefiting the common man of the country. So anything which benefits the common man of the country is called populist. That way, the statement, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, I don't mean to be sounding political, but the statement of Mr. Rahul Gandhi is making is also a populist statement. So, anything which the government does has to be for the benefit of the people. So let it be populist. I mean, I don't think government should be taking it with a pinch of salt. Yes, it is a populist budget because if this is meant for people, this is meant for upliftment of the society. So I really don't take that very seriously, honestly speaking, without having any allegiance to Congress or the BJP for that matter.
All right, let me also rope in Mr. Sunil Garg once again. Mr. Garg, the tweaks that have been made in the tax slabs, has that become more of a formality now every year when the budget is announced? Or do you think, with some of the compliance issues that come about when it comes to collecting taxes, this really does not matter?
No, I want to just add to Dr. Sharad Kohli. There are certain hits in the budget. It's a balanced budget, but certain misses also there. Like Startup India, it's a dream project of Prime Minister. But have we done the audit of the scheme? What it has achieved, Startup India, what it has achieved? Secondly, regarding the employment generation, you have given the incentive to the organized sector, but a lot of employment is being generated by the unorganized sector and rural labor. No incentive for them. Thirdly, we are claiming that inflation is around 5%. But why everybody is complaining? Every housewoman is complaining about the inflation issue. So these are the certain issues which has to be addressed by the Honorable FM. Regarding the tax slabs, as I said, it may be a populist budget, but the middle class again feel that they are not being taken care of properly. Like government is spending a lot of money to so many social welfare schemes. On one hand, you are saying that we are giving Ausman help to 50 crore people, but you are withdrawing the 80D benefit to the middle class. So there are hits, there are misses. Of course, it's a balanced budget. One of the hit may be a 100 crore credit guarantee scheme for the MSME because private investment was not coming. So this 100 crore credit guarantee scheme may give a chance for the capex for the private player also.
All right. Uh, uh, Mr. Chachra, what about Mudra and Skill India? How effective have they been in achieving their objective in terms of that inclusive growth that the government is so passionate about?
A lot more on Mudra and Skill India, a lot more needs to be done. And I think this budget also talks about newer skilling initiatives. The fourth initiative under the PM Skills program has been announced today. So there is a huge skill gap. There is a whole new needed focus to augment the skill levels. I think it's a big area of work. We are crores and crores of people and crores of sort of working people and newer younger people joining workforce every day. So the question of skilling at the higher end, the question of skilling at the very, very high end, artificial intelligence was being talked of. And if you see one of the big challenges that we face, and IT industry is facing it very strongly, that outsourcing which used to happen from the northern countries, from the Western countries, is likely to be hit with AI developments in a short span of time. And you can see the IT sector shares falling in response to that. So I think the question of skilling and upgrading skills at a very high, extremely high levels, but also from a totally non-skill to a skill bracket, it needs a much more bigger focus. Skill India program is a welcome program. But in case of assessment of Skill India program, let me put it that it's a journey which has just begun, which is not even half covered. So quite clearly, that emphasis needs to go on much more. You were talking, and briefly, you were talking about green transitions with Mr. Satish, and I think it's welcome the net zero targets by 2070, and he was talking about balances. I think that's a great path to go. But the question which we must quickly arrive at is the question of climate justice. Because as we know, the impact of climate change is differentially borne by our different social classes. And I think we must also recognize that in these pathways to achieve net zero, in these pathways of green transition, in these pathways of adaptation and mitigation, which have been announced today, the treatment has to be differential. We have to sort of look at what is happening to the working people of India, what is happening to the construction workers of India, what's happening to the street vendors of India, what's happening to the agricultural workers of India, what's happening to the small farmers of India, to the fisher folk of India, to the pastoralists of India who are bearing immense losses. And in that path of climate justice, we must address their loss and damages. We must compensate their habitat losses, their home losses, their wage losses. So I think there's a lot of things that need to add on. As Mr. Kohli was saying, this is essentially a new budget will be announced on the 1st of February come 2025. So we have only these many months. The expectations remain huge.
Right, sir.
Some positive points in some areas which the next budget can dwell on.
Let me quickly take a reaction to what you said from Satish as well. Satish, important to understand that climate change is being tackled with, but climate justice is a different apparatus. It's a different ball game altogether, and perhaps its a subtlety is also something which is surreptitiously creeping into our lives, but it's not been accounted for when budgeting.
See, the government has to play a very important role, in all these initiatives because eventually businesses exist for profits. We know that. And from an investor standpoint and government standpoint, patience is extremely important, right? India has chosen 2070 as a net zero goal as against other countries at 2050. So government was bold to announce that in various global platforms, right? Now, what personally I would believe that, more incentives by government to promote the end consumers, buy green products, more stringent rules towards the businesses, to promote green investments, beyond just disclosures and various strategies. I think some of the initiatives and policy support from the government is going to be important. Needless to say, I think government has done a lot from a transition standpoint, to the green economy, but eventually the end consumer purchases and the purchases by the businesses of the sustainable products is going to be pretty important, to really balance out the justice. Yes, the beginning has happened, but we have to be patient in that journey, I think that's going to be extremely critical.
All
And I
right.
think again, some of the other elements, for example, in the budgets also, for instance, though we touched upon some of the elements, but including the taxonomy for climate finance, and the role of MSME, some of the initiatives have been and support have been announced for the MSME also, in the green transition. I think these are some of the steps with gradually and that direction, but yes, we need to be patient.
All right, good points there, Satish. In fact, joining us on the show at this point in time is also Mr. Vinesh Menon, co-chair, CII, and CEO of Ampersand. Vinesh, if you can hear me, thank you for speaking with us. Vinesh,
Yeah, hi, can you hear
your initial impressions. Yeah, we can hear you. Vinesh, your initial impressions of this budget. I know education is your forte. Education is the space that you obviously want to improve. You want to see changes in terms of that aspiration and that expectation. How important were the announcements that were made today in terms of the budget?
So I am going to be pretty honest. I'm not particularly excited about what has come from the budget. I think the intent is in the right place. There has been a few keynotes and keywords that have been very useful. Upgradation of 1,000 ITIs. And on paper, I think 1.48 lakh crore is what has been allocated, which is definitely higher than the previous year. But overall, if you look at where we stand in the education ecosystem, especially the K-12 schools, given the size and the diversity of the country, I think much more needs to be done. I think a big bang reform is needed to be done, just like how the reforms are done in the space of UPI and the direct benefit transfers, etc. I think something similar needs to be done in the education space. So overall, if you ask me, a bit disappointed, tad disappointed. I know the outlays have been put, but I think the specifics, the devil lies in the details, and I don't think the details have been really got into. The other area which I'm a little disappointed with is no real talk about how whole scheme called the PM Shri schools. No real talk about how innovation and technology can be upgraded to try and reach the last mile connectivity. I think there has been a amount of some 355 crores been allotted to research. That's hardly, really nothing, if you ask me, in terms of what we need to do. So yeah, so overall, tad disappointing.
Right, but Vinesh, there has been allocation made towards skilling. There is a new scheme where the government is going to allocate about 1.4 lakh 8 crore for education, employment, and skilling in the country. The internship program is also something which not necessarily addresses the disappointments that some of the experts have described, but it definitely touches upon that surface. Is there anything that appeals to you about that announcement? Vinesh? All right, there seems to be a problem with your frame, Vinesh. Let me come back to you momentarily. Let me, in fact, rope in Vandana also at this point. Vinesh, there seems to be a problem with your network. If you can join us again, we'll be able to hear you better. There seems to be a connection issue. Vandana, your impressions of the government's initiative towards the skilling sector and how important it is perhaps going to be for medium and small industries.
Absolutely. I think it's a great initiative. As Sandeep ji was mentioning, we're going to look at maybe a loss of jobs in the IT space because of AI taking over. And upskilling and diversifying is something which is very welcome. If we are looking at creating the number of jobs that we want to and becoming the $1 trillion economy that we have. Of course, I'd like to focus on the jobs and skills that are talked about in the travel and tourism space of it. And there is so much in this space in terms of, I brushed about it briefly when I spoke a little while ago on maybe just in the space of generating homestay hosts. We can look at different aspects of tourism. Sandeep ji and me were just discussing offline about the space of ecotourism coming up, wherein, the whole concept of travel being environmentally friendly and bringing about development in the far-flung areas of the country. And it's a great way to build that. I'd like to actually quote an anecdotal thing about in 2016, when we did not really have a lot of solar electrification and solar hadn't come to the country in a big way, we actually used travel and tourism in the company as a means by which we brought about, we solar electrified a remote village in Ladakh. And this was basically done with a bunch of participants who came in from the US. And so, we trekked to the region and electrified the region. So I feel like there's a whole bunch of stuff which could be done using travel, tourism, allied activities to bring about this holistic development that we are looking of in the nation.
All right, let me open Vinesh once again. I hope I'm able to hear him at this point in time. Vinesh, thank you for rejoining. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, all right. Okay, certain misses you expressed in the education sector, but the government is...
I got the question.
The government is very upbeat, aspirational about, skilling India. Is that something which also, maybe a direct offshoot of, what education does and how it can benefit?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that there has been a lot of work being done in that area. And like I said, I did not dismiss the budget. All I said is that given the expectation that one had especially in the areas of reforms for school ecosystem, it is a little a little disappointing there. Yes, the upgradation of the ITIs, the 1,000 ITI upgradation, the kind of money put behind the internships, the emphasis on Skill India and trying to build that area up is very, very encouraging and much needed, because you have this lot of the youth which are actually falling out of school, attrition rates are high, and one needs to figure out a way to keep them probably skilled and ready for livelihood in the future. So to that extent, I am with the budget. I just wish that they had even taken a little more a step back and tried to do some work in the schooling area, especially because this is a year, 2020 was the year when NEP came into being. And NEP, after 3 decades, is a game-changing platform for school education and higher education. So my only question is that has already been out and has been running for 3 years. Implementation of that is very important. And I wish there was a little bit of detailing on the budget around that area. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm completely for what is being done for skill and livelihood. I'm just stepping a little back towards the school education where I feel there's a little, which is not really. And you mentioned about 1.48 lakh crore outlay. Like I said, yes, it is a pretty decent outlay. But don't forget, way back in 1964, the Kothari Commission, way back in 1964, they wanted about 6% of the GDP allocated for education, and it's still struggling at about 3%. So there is a bit of a gap there. So the 2 gaps, one is the gap 3% to 6%, and second is the application of the budget and broken up into, let's say, preschool, schools, and then of course moving into higher education. That's all I'm trying to say.
All right, Dr. Kohli, the Indian economy needs to create about 7 million jobs annually until 2030 to meet demands of a growing workforce. How do you think this budget predicts as well as accommodates for this kind of a growth?
Vineet, when my preceding speaker was speaking, Vinesh, when he was talking about the misses, that this has not been done, that has not been done. So I was remembering a couplet from Ghalib. हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले, बहुत निकले बजट के प्रावधान फिर भी कम निकले. So there's going to be no end to, Vineet, our wishes. After all, our resources are limited. It's a 48 lakh crore budget. We have a deficit of 5%. Our expenditure is more than revenue. Well, the same is the case with most of the countries around the world. But I think in a country like this, the best way to go is that a budget should be. This is one way of doing. You touch upon every sector here and there. But another way of doing it is, Vineet, that we can make these budgets themed, and we could have more than one budgets in a year. You could have a quarterly budget, or you could have a half-yearly budget. This could be an alternate where one budget could be themed on agriculture, the other on MSMEs, the third budget could be on services, fourth could be on exclusively focusing on employment generation. Then there could be another budget which could just focus on inflation measures. I think this can be it can be brainstormed, and this could be an alternate where the government every 3 months gives a quarterly budget, and every budget has got a theme. I think that could be another way, because otherwise it could be glass half empty or half full, the way you look at it. Because if I start listing out the misses, I'll probably burn away rest of your show time. I was only trying to put up what is listed in the budget. Well, if you miss, there are so many misses. I am the very first person I would like to tell Vinesh that I feel as far as education is concerned, the universities in these countries are degree printing factories. After 18 years of study in a university, you ask your child, "Ab aage kya karoge beta?" That is the question. So after 18 years, look at what happens in America. You're out of the university, you're in a corporate job. Why is our university not training a person for the corporate world? Why do you have to look for a higher degree, which you don't even get that easily? So I think as far as misses are concerned, there are plenty. But then from whatever has been listed within the resources, I think, and we should not forget, as I said, I would like to reiterate, there's going to be another budget in 6 months from now. So I think the government may have phased out, but broadly, it has laid down a roadmap ahead for 2047, which is a developed country. And I think we'll have to take one step at a time. We cannot, leapfrog suddenly into an era and we'll touch upon everything. The resources are limited. At the ground level, the implementation is a big question. We should not forget that for each of the announcements made, when you go to the ground level, you will find some of those babus and the government machinery, the admin machinery down there. They are not that serious. The way, the josh with which the finance minister speaks and the whole team makes the budget, that josh gradually dwindles as you go down the ladder. So I think that is also a challenge, and which we've been witnessing this for the last 75 years, that when it comes to the ground implementation, things really don't move as quickly as they're expected to be. Yes, there are misses. There are areas which has not been touched upon, but I'm sure they are counting on the minds in the corridors of the finance ministry and in the budgets to come. We've got 4 more budgets to come until 2029. And I'm sure there's a lot lying in the offing, when 1st February 2025 comes. And I'm sure we are going to address those misses. And we should not forget NewsX talking about these misses. Who knows, somebody may be having his ear wide open to listen to what we are saying, and it just might be included in the next budget. Who knows, Vinesh's voice must have already reached finance minister corridors, thanks to NewsX. Vineet.
All right. Let me, in fact, have Vinesh respond to what you have said. Of course, Vinesh is important in terms of understanding this scope and this entire environment when it comes to education. Vinesh, would you like to respond to Dr. Kohli? Vinesh? Okay. Vinesh, let me come back to you shortly. In fact, joining us on the show at this point in time is Mr. Jayan Mehta, Managing Director of Amul. Mr. Mehta, appreciate you taking out the time, sir, and speaking with us. Nice to see you happy and smile. Sir, your first reaction to the budget today, what did you make of this budget? Of course, right before you joined us, we were discussing that it cannot be a populist budget to the extent that it pleases everyone. There are going to be some misses, there are going to be some hits. How do you rate this budget, sir?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show. Budget is overall a policy which shows the way in which the government is looking at every single sector and the direction it wants to move on. Talking about this specific budget, we are happy to see the consistency, we are happy to see the continuity, and we are happy to see the sharp focus on the future. Talking about the cooperative sector, if you recall, the Honorable Prime Minister said last year that the focus of the government will be on the women, on the poor, on the farmers, on the youth. And cooperatives are rightfully, and going by the Amul model, which I represent, have demonstrated that they have the capability to contribute to the overall growth of all these 4 castes, as the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned. Talking in the same breath, I would also add that 3 years back, the new Ministry of Cooperation was formed at the central level. Over the last couple of years, they've unleashed almost 54 different initiatives trying to strengthen the cooperative movement, including setting up of the 3 multi-state cooperatives. And today they announced about the new cooperative policy. Now I've been fortunate to be a part of the member of this drafting committee, and been watching very closely of the focus of the government, of all the members into strengthening the cooperative movement, and not just talking about cooperatives as just a principle, but it's walking the talk, right from having a level playing field from the cooperatives to sharp focus on marketing, to building grassroots organizations, inclusiveness, social agenda to be taken care of. business objectives to be met, and more importantly, using technology to have a clear focus on how we are ready for the future. So all said and done, I think for the cooperative sector, this augurs in a very good opportunity to build on what's happened over the last 77 years since independence, and almost the same time Amul has been in the space, and also keep a sharp focus on where we need to go for future, into areas where actually government cannot do its work, private sector cannot be expected to do, and that's where the cooperatives as a body of members come in, and with the right support and all of the government approach, they can deliver the results.
So there is also an impetus and a push towards skilling India. The internship program that the government announced is obviously an initiative by the government, but there is a large corporate responsibility, not corporate social responsibility, sir, but corporate responsibility to tag along if we have to solve the unemployment issue. How much do you concur with that?
I fully agree, because see, we run ourselves more than 100 plants. Okay, and talent, of course, is the most important thing which drives the business. And here we are talking of multiple sets of organizations across the country, all requiring talent to be future ready. It cannot happen without internship. It cannot happen without the industry understanding and orientation. All of us want to recruit experienced people, but who is the first person to give you experience? So this is where I think this is a path-breaking initiative. It sounds very simple that you are contributing to either the first salary or asking 500 organizations to build onto this. But actually, in real life, for a person who wants to get into this workspace, you cannot find a more better welcome and a hand-holding, which is actually by the industry, but backed by the government. So I think if properly done, and I think as industries and cooperatives, we do that very consistently, because we have dairy science colleges working with us, the veterinary colleges working with us, the food technology institutes working with us. We've been doing it, and we need to do it actually. But now with a more structured way, I think it will be very good for the youth of the country, and at least they know there's somebody who's worried about them.
Mr. Mehta, even if you look at the global context, how would you rate India's stability basis what the budget also exuded today? Considering our GDP and the GDP number at this point in time, it's double of the global average. What does that tell you about the right moves that have been made in the last 10 years, including the bad phase of COVID-19?
Yeah, I think the economic policy which was announced yesterday gives out all what we do, and obviously we all been not just waiting for this document, but also seeing and watching what's happening in different parts of the world. So India definitely is a very, very shining spot in the globe, not just the GDP or the growth of the economy, but overall the vibrancy of all the sectors that we are in. I mean, we can value India only when you go out of the country and realize that even the developed countries are not as, so to say, shining as you expected them. Be it the digital inclusion, the technology being used across, the ubiquitousness of the different modes of payment that we see today, and more importantly, the infrastructure, the focus on the markets. And India, now the largest populous country in the world, the biggest consumer market also in the world. And let me be very, very clear about this, that never ever in history of this planet, you will find more than 70 crore people, I mean, half of our population, less than 25 years of age, residing in one such geography. So it is India's place time now, but more importantly, next 10, 20 years will be very, very defining for the country. And so if we are dreaming for the top 2, top 3 position, I think it is immensely achievable.
Mr. Mehta, the government is also extremely ambitious about digital integration and digital inclusivity as well. But that is not alone the government's job. How incumbent does it become also on the corporate sector, to go hand in hand with the government's vision of, a complete digital Bharat?
Yeah, obviously it's our job to do it, because that's where it's obviously not the government which can be expected to do so. I can talk about Amul. We are in 18,600 villages of Gujarat, 3.6 million farmers, and most of them are women. So we have a drive now to connect all the farmer accounts to the cooperative banks and make direct payment into their bank accounts. I'm more than 95% through in that thing. So this shows the strength of a cooperative to integrate with another cooperative, which is a bank again owned by the similar set of farmers. And we are able to drive not just digital inclusion, but also women empowerment. Also ensure that the economy grows with the right tools and they get the benefits of modern financial terms like the credit cards that we use. And also multiple schemes of the government can also be driven to this kind of integration. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to be doing so. And as corporates and cooperatives, it's our responsibility also to see that we are able to expedite this, the digital inclusion part, women empowerment part, and more importantly, economic activity grows in the every single village, which reduces the need for migration. People get employment at the place where they are. And the pride of being associated with a brand like Amul, which is a $10 billion brand, is of course added icing on the cake for the members.
Mr. Mehta, so there's going to be another budget in another 6 months. We had the interim budget before the Lok Sabha elections took place, and we have another budget in July. Are there any expectations that you have of the government when it comes to more planning and more inclusivity and more foresight into some of the issues that still plague our country?
Obviously, the expectations are endless because when you are in industry and we are in this environment, obviously a lot of farmers also speak their voices and have a request. Talking about the dairy, India is the largest producer of milk in the world. About 1/4 of the total milk in the world is going to be is being produced in India today. In the next decade, it's going to be more than 30%. So you need to grow this industry through consolidation, not necessarily more number of cows, but improving the productivity and other things. So many of these measures have been considered in the budgets, not just this year, but in the past years also. But one interesting thing I should like to mention here, that the value of output of milk is more than wheat, paddy, and oilseeds put together. So milk is the largest agricultural crop of the country with value of output more than 12 lakh crore rupees. But unfortunately for the farmers, the income from milk is not exempt from tax as it is in case of agriculture. So we would request the government to keep this in mind that if we want to become a dairy to the world, and we are 8 crore families depending on milk for their livelihood, and most of them are women, a small measure to exclude milk income from taxation and treat it like agriculture will be a path-breaking move and will benefit crores of families across the country, but more importantly, give them confidence that if they put in their bit into it, the dream of India becoming a dairy to the world will be achieved at a much faster rate.
Mr. Mehta, really appreciate you taking out the time, sir, and speaking with us. Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Manish Tiwari, Congress leader and lawyer, also joins us on the show. Mr. Tiwari, thank you for taking out the time and speaking with NewsX. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Mr. Tiwari, your first impressions of this budget, before I get into specifics, what are your general impressions of the budget that was read out in the parliament today?
Well, there is an English proverb, and it goes as such that the tail wags the dog. So therefore, you had political compulsions written all over the budget. In fact, I think this budget is the first manifestation of the realities of coalition politics for the BJP government. I was struck by the fact that for the past 10 years, there seemed to be no love lost for either Andhra Pradesh or Bihar. And suddenly, the pot of love was overflowing in terms of the largesse and the bounty which was being distributed to both these states. So if there is a political message out of this budget, the political message is that this is a coalition government and the compulsions of coalition are going to dictate the economic priorities of the government.
Mr. Tiwari, apart from the obvious observation that you have had about the coalition angle, are there any other positive takeaways from this budget?
Well, what really worries me, first of all, the budget is an income and expenditure statement of the government. And it's an annual opportunity for the finance minister to grandstand on everything from motherhood to apple pie. The budget is a non-event in most democracies around the world. Unfortunately, it's the most hyped up event for reasons that I failed to understand over a large number of years. It may be connected with TRPs in revenue, but I'm not going down that street. The fact is that what is really worrisome about this budget is that we are hovering in the deficit region of about 16 to 17 lakh crores for the last 3 or 4 years. Now, it was understandable in the years or the year after COVID-19 or the second year after COVID-19 that it would take some time for the government revenues to recover. But the fact is that even in 24-25, if your expenditure is going to be in the range of about 48 lakh crores and your revenue is in the range of about 31 lakh 29,200 crores, there is a worry. And the worry is primarily because if you look at it in a larger perspective, over the past 10 years, the national debt has increased by 113 lakh crores. It's gone up from about 55 lakh crores to about 169 lakh crores insofar as the current fiscal is concerned. And in fact, I had asked this question of the government yesterday also, and there's an unstarred reply that is government borrowing in order to finance its revenue expenditure, which seems to be the case because essentially, if government was borrowing, and good prudence says that you borrow in order to finance capital expenditure. And there does not seem to be a tangible linkage between the borrowings of the government and the amount that it has spent on public capital expenditure, though of course they've been financing the growth of the economy for the past 3 years out of public capex because the private sector has not kicked in, despite the fact that the finance minister gave them a huge tax relief in 2019-20 in a series of mini budgets, which actually brought down the effective corporate income tax rate from about 30% or 33% to about 22%, right? So eventually you have a situation whereby the fisc is a problem. Number two, stubborn headline inflation, especially food inflation, is a problem. There is no clear, tangible path to where the employment generation is going to come from. All these skilling announcements is like the announcement which had been made that we'll generate 2 crore new jobs every year way back in 2014. So like the 20 crore jobs vanished into the thin air like the gypsy camp vanished into the blue. Similarly, these are only statements of intent. Ultimately, if you expect the corporate sector to follow through on them, well, the corporate sector never followed through, never did follow through on the huge tax rebates which were given to them, which you thought is going to actually start the wheels of the economy turning again.
Mr. Tiwari, what about the GDP? The government is obviously happy about the fact that it's been twice the average of the global GDP, and that is putting India in a bright spot. If you compare the rest of the world, what do you have to make of that? And this is a number, sir, which has been consistent.
See, ultimately, there are, you change the baseline, you will always get a new GDP number. So therefore, when you change the baseline from 2004-5 to 2010-11, obviously, you adjusted your GDP number. But essentially, GDP is not a reflection on the improvement of the quality of life of people. And I'll give you an example. In the past 10 years, the allocations on Manrega have gone up by 300%. It was in the range of 28,000 crores in 2013-14. It's currently in the range of about 86,000 to 90,000 crores, which means that in rural India, people are willing to work at the minimum wage rate, which is possibly the most telling evidence of very, very severe rural distress in our agrarian or rural economy. So the GDP number does not tell the story about the improvement in the quality of lives of people. I think too much is made out of this whole number. Essentially, at the end of the day, you see, every economy has a natural trajectory. Every economy will go from 2 trillion to 2.5 trillion to 3 trillion to 3.5 trillion. That's a natural progression of the economy. Question is not that you have a $3 trillion economy. The question is that how many years did it take you to get there? Weren't we supposed to be a $5 trillion economy by the year 24, 25? Why are we hovering in the range of 3.8 trillion? So I think once you start desegregating the budget numbers and start looking at it in some great depth, which we would do if I continue to be on the Standing Committee of Finance, then you really start getting a real picture of how badly or well the economy is performing.
Mr. Tiwari, appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us at such short notice. Really appreciate you joining us, sir.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.